On a Saturday afternoon in August of 1975, at the Platte County Fair in Columbus, Nebraska, a John Deere dealer named Wayne Pruitt made the most expensive mistake of his life. He bet $15,000 on a sure thing. The sure thing was his brand new John Deere 4430, 150 horsepower of modern engineering, fresh off the showroom floor, worth $18,000 and change. Wayne had driven it to the fair himself, polishing it twice on the way, making sure everyone saw him behind the wheel of the finest piece of farm equipment money could buy. The annual tractor pull was the highlight of the county fair, and Wayne Pruitt had won it 3 years running. Not because he was a good farmer. Wayne hadn't done actual farm work in 20 years, but because he always had the newest, most powerful equipment. In the world of tractor pulls, horsepower was king, and Wayne Pruitt had more horsepower than anyone else in Platte County. At least, that's what he thought. The registration table was set up under a canvas tent near the pulling track. Wayne was signing his entry form when he heard a sound that made him look up, the unmistakable rumble of an old Farmall engine, popping and chugging its way across the fairgrounds. He turned to see Leonard Grove driving a 1952 Farmall Super M toward the registration tent. Wayne started to laugh before Leonard even reached the table. "Leonard," Wayne called out, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "please tell me you're not entering that museum piece in the pull." Leonard shut off the engine and climbed down from the seat. He was 55 years old, lean and weathered, with hands that showed decades of hard work. He walked to the registration table without acknowledging Wayne's laughter. "Entry form for the open class," Leonard said to the woman behind the table. "Leonard." Wayne stepped closer, still grinning. "I'm serious. You can't bring that antique into the competition. It's embarrassing. For you, for the fair, for everyone." Leonard took the form and started filling it out. "Entries open to any farm tractor. Says so right here. It's open to tractors, not relics. That thing's what, 23 years old? It was obsolete when Eisenhower was president." Leonard kept writing. Wayne looked around at the crowd that was gathering. Other farmers, fair workers, spectators drawn by the sound of raised voices. He saw an opportunity. "Tell you what, Leonard." Wayne's voice got louder, playing to the audience. "I'll make you a deal. You scratch that embarrassment from the competition right now, and I'll give you $500 cash for it. That's more than it's worth as scrap metal." Leonard finished filling out the form and handed it to the woman, along with his entry fee. Then he turned to face Wayne for the first time. "Not interested. Not interested?" Wayne laughed. "Leonard, I'm offering you money for that junk heap. Real money. What do you think is going to happen out there? You think that relic is going to compete with a 4433? Leonard looked at Wayne's gleaming John Deere, then back at Wayne. "I think we'll find out." Something in Leonard's voice made Wayne pause. There was no anger there, no defensiveness, just a quiet certainty that didn't match the situation. It annoyed Wayne. It annoyed him more than the laughter would have. "Fine." Wayne's voice hardened. "You want to embarrass yourself? Go ahead. But let's make it interesting." He pulled out his wallet and started counting bills. $15,000. Right here. I bet $15,000 that my 4430 beats your Junkyard Farmall by at least 50 feet. A murmur went through the crowd. $15,000 was more than most of them made in a year. Leonard didn't blink. "I don't have $15,000. "No, I don't suppose you do." Wayne smiled, sensing victory. "But you've got something else. That farm of yours, what is it, 160 acres? Put up the deed. Your farm against my 15,000. Winner takes all." Now the crowd went silent. Betting money was one thing. Betting a man's land was something else entirely. "Wayne." One of the other farmers stepped forward. "That's going too far. You can't." "Stay out of this, Earl. This is between me and Leonard." Wayne kept his eyes locked on the older man. "What do you say, Leonard? You so confident in that rust bucket. Put your farm where your mouth is." Leonard was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the crowd, at Wayne, at the two tractors sitting in the afternoon sun, one gleaming and new, one faded and old. Then he smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but something about it made Wayne's confidence flicker just slightly. "All right," Leonard said. "You're on." Let me tell you about Leonard Grove, because to understand what happened next, you need to understand who he was and what that Farmall meant to him. Leonard was born in 1920, in the same farmhouse where he still lived in 19... His father, August Grove, had worked that land since 1898, first as a hired hand, then as a tenant, and finally as an owner after 20 years of saving every penny. August Grove believed in one thing above all else, understanding how things worked. "Any fool can buy a machine," August used to say. "It takes a man to know what's inside it." Leonard grew up taking things apart and putting them back together. Clocks, pumps, engines, anything mechanical. By the time he was 15, he could rebuild a tractor engine blindfolded. By the time he was 20, there wasn't a machine in Platte County he couldn't fix. Then came the war. Leonard enlisted in 1942, and the Army, recognizing his mechanical genius, assigned him to a tank maintenance unit in North Africa and later Italy. For 3 years, he kept Sherman tanks running in conditions that would have destroyed lesser mechanics. He learned to improvise, to modify, to squeeze performance out of machines that had no business still operating. He came home in 1945 with a Bronze Star and a head full of knowledge that nobody in Nebraska had ever seen before. In 1952, Leonard bought his Farmall Super M brand new. It was the finest tractor International harvester made, and Leonard paid cash for it, money he'd saved during the war and in the years after. But Leonard didn't just buy a tractor. He bought a project. From the day that Farmall arrived on his farm, Leonard started modifying it. Not to show off, not to win competitions, but because he couldn't help himself. He saw potential in that engine that the factory had never imagined. The work took years, decades really. Every winter when the fields were dormant, Leonard was in his workshop, improving the Farmall piece by piece. He bored out the cylinders and fitted custom pistons that he machined himself. He redesigned the fuel injection system for better combustion. He strengthened the crankshaft with alloys he'd learned about from a metallurgist he'd met in Italy. He rebuilt the transmission with gears that could handle twice the original torque. From the outside, the tractor looked the same, maybe worse, as the years added rust and dents and faded the red paint to something closer to brown. But inside, where it mattered, the Farmall Super M had been transformed into something that had never existed before. Leonard never told anyone what he'd done. He never bragged, never showed off, never entered competitions. He just worked his farm, year after year, with a tractor that people laughed at and a secret that he kept to himself, until Wayne Pruitt made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Now let me tell you about the day of the competition, because this is where the story gets good. The Platte County Fair tractor pull was held on a dirt track behind the main exhibition hall. The rules were simple. Hook your tractor to a weighted sled and pull it as far as you can. The sled was designed to get heavier as it moved, transferring weight forward until eventually even the strongest tractor couldn't move it anymore. 15 tractors were entered that year. Everything from small Fords to massive John Deeres, all lined up in the staging area, all waiting for their turn. Word of the bet had spread through the fairgrounds like wildfire. By the time the competition started, there were 3 times as many spectators as usual, all crammed into the wooden bleachers and spilling out onto the grass. Wayne Pruitt loved the attention. He walked around his 4430, polishing invisible spots, explaining to anyone who would listen why his tractor was guaranteed to win. 150 horsepower, Wayne said to a group of admirers. 8-speed power shift transmission. This is the most advanced tractor John Deere has ever made. That Farmall of Leonard's, 44 horsepower. 44. It's not even a contest. Nearby, Leonard sat quietly on the fender of his Farmall, drinking coffee from a thermos, watching the earlier competitors make their runs. A reporter from the local newspaper approached him. "Mr. Grove, I'm writing about the bet. Can you tell me why you think your tractor can beat a machine with 3 times the horsepower?" Leonard took a sip of coffee. "Horsepower isn't everything." "What do you mean?" I mean, there's more to a tractor than what the brochure says. Leonard looked at the reporter with those calm, steady eyes. Weight distribution, torque curve, traction efficiency, how the power gets from the engine to the ground. He nodded toward Wayne's 4430. That's a lot of tractor, but a lot of tractor means a lot of weight in the wrong places. It'll spin its wheels before it uses half that horsepower, and yours won't. Leonard smiled. Mine's been spinning wheels for 23 years. I've had time to figure out what works. The reporter wrote something in his notebook, looking skeptical. Everyone looked skeptical. The smart money, all of it, was on Wayne Pruitt. Let me tell you about the pull itself, because this is the moment everyone had been waiting for. The competition worked its way through the smaller tractors first, then the medium class, building toward the main event. By the time the open class was announced, the sun was getting low, and the crowd was getting restless. Wayne Pruitt was scheduled to pull third from last. Leonard Grove was last. Wayne's run was impressive. The 4430 hooked to the sled, dug in, and pulled with a roar that echoed across the fairgrounds. The sled moved steadily down the track, 200 feet, 250, 300. At 320 feet, the wheels started spinning, throwing up clouds of dirt. At 331 feet, the tractor couldn't move the sled any further. The crowd cheered. Wayne climbed down from the 4430 with his arms raised in triumph. 331 feet was the best pull of the day. Better than any of the other competitors. Beat that, Wayne shouted, pointing at Leonard. Go ahead, old man. Try to beat that with your museum piece. Leonard didn't respond. He just climbed into the seat of his farmall and drove it to the starting line. The contrast was almost comical. Wayne's 4430 sat gleaming beside the track, massive and modern. Leonard's farmall looked like something that should have been retired to a county historical society years ago. The hookup crew attached the sled to Leonard's drawbar. The judge raised his flag. "Ready?" the judge called. Leonard nodded. The flag dropped. What happened next is still talked about in Platte County to this day. Leonard engaged the clutch, and the farmall's engine note changed. It went from the familiar pop and chug of an old tractor to something else entirely, a deep, smooth growl that seemed to come from a machine twice its size. The rear tires didn't spin. They gripped. The sled started moving. Slowly at first, then steadily, the farmall pulled it down the track without any of the wheel spin that had plagued Wayne's 4430. 100 feet. The crowd was silent. 200 feet. People were standing up in the bleachers. 300 feet. Leonard's farmall was still pulling, still gripping, still moving the sled that had stopped the most powerful tractor in the county. 331 feet, the mark where Wayne's 4430 had stopped. The farmall kept going. 350 feet, 375, 400. At 423 feet, the sled finally stopped the farmall. Leonard's engine roared for another few seconds, the tires finally spinning in the dirt, before he backed off the throttle and shut it down. 423 feet, 492 feet farther than Wayne Pruitt's brand new John Deere. The crowd exploded. Let me tell you about the silence, because that's what Leonard remembers most. After the cheering died down, after the judges confirmed the distance, after the crowd started buzzing with disbelief and excitement, there was a moment of silence around Wayne Pruitt. He was standing next to his 4430, staring at the distance markers, trying to understand what had just happened. His face had gone pale. His hands were shaking. $15,000. He'd bet $15,000 that he would win by at least 50 feet. Instead, he'd lost by more than 90. Leonard walked over to him, slow and unhurried, while the crowd watched. Wayne looked at him. There was no arrogance left in his face, no smugness, just the hollow look of a man who had just lost more money than he could afford. "How?" Wayne whispered. "That's impossible. 44 horsepower can't beat 150. It's not possible." "The brochure says 44 horsepower," Leonard agreed. "The brochure's wrong." "What did you do to it?" Leonard considered the question. 23 years of work, thousands of hours in his workshop, knowledge gathered from Italy and the army, and a lifetime of understanding machines. How do you explain all that? I listened to it, Leonard said finally. I learned what it could do, and then I helped it do it. Wayne shook his head, not understanding. The money, he said. I don't have $15,000 cash. I can write you a check, but the dealership account, I'd have to move some things around. I don't want your money. Wayne blinked. What? I said I don't want your money. Leonard looked at the crowd, at the judges, at the two tractors sitting in the fading afternoon light. Keep your $15,000, Wayne, the crowd murmured in confusion. Wayne stared at Leonard like he was speaking a foreign language. I don't understand. We had a bet. You won. The money? I didn't enter this competition for money. Leonard's voice was calm, but it carried across the suddenly quiet fairgrounds. I entered because you called my tractor a piece of junk, because you've been calling it junk for 20 years, along with everyone else who thinks newer is always better. He turned to face the crowd. This tractor was built in It's been on my farm every day since. It's plowed my fields, pulled my wagons, done everything I ever asked it to do. And every time I drove it past Wayne's dealership, he laughed. Every time I brought it to town, people pointed and whispered, "There goes Leonard and his museum piece. There goes Leonard and his Junkyard Farmall." Leonard paused, letting the words settle. I didn't need your money, Wayne. I just needed everyone to see what this junk could do when it was built by someone who understood it. Now they've seen. He turned back to Wayne. Keep your $15,000. I already got what I came for. He walked back to his farmall, climbed into the seat, and drove away from the fairgrounds without looking back. Wayne Pruitt stood there for a long time, $15,000 still in his pocket, watching the taillights of a 23-year-old tractor disappear into the Nebraska evening. He had won his bet back, but somehow, he had never felt more like a loser. Now let me tell you about what happened after. Because the story doesn't end at the fairgrounds. The Platte County Fair tractor pull of 1975 became legend. The story spread across Nebraska, then across the Midwest, growing with each telling. Leonard Grove and his miracle farmall were talked about in feed stores and diners and farm equipment dealerships for years. Wayne Pruitt's dealership never recovered. Not financially, the dealership was fine, at least for a while. But Wayne's reputation was destroyed. The man who had bet $15,000 against a junkyard farmall and lost became a laughingstock. Farmers who had once respected his opinion now smiled behind his back. Salesmen from competing dealerships told the story at every opportunity. Within 2 years, Wayne sold the dealership and moved to Omaha. He never worked in the farm equipment business again. Leonard Grove went back to farming. He never entered another competition, never showed off his farmall, never bragged about what he'd done. When people asked him about the famous tractor pull, he'd just shrug and say, "The tractor did the work, I just drove it." But something had changed in Platte County. The old farmers, the ones who remembered when tractors were simple and fixable, and a man could understand every part of his own machine, started talking about Leonard with a respect that bordered on reverence. And the younger farmers started asking questions. How did you do it, Leonard? How did you get that kind of power out of an old farmall? Leonard never gave away all his secrets, but he taught what he could. Over the next decade, he became an informal mentor to a generation of farmers who wanted to understand their equipment, not just use it. Any fool can buy a machine. Leonard would tell them the same words his father had used. It takes a man to know what's inside it. Let me tell you about 1985, because that's when the story came full circle. The farm crisis hit Nebraska hard. Interest rates spiked. Commodity prices crashed. Land values collapsed. Farmers who had borrowed to expand found themselves owing more than their farms were worth. The Platte County Fairgrounds, where Leonard had won his famous victory, became the site of weekly foreclosure auctions. Families who had worked the land for generations watched their equipment sold off to pay debts they couldn't escape. Leonard Grove never had that problem. He had never borrowed money, never expanded beyond what he could manage, never bought new equipment when the old equipment still worked. He'd been farming the same 160 acres with the same 1952 Farmall for 33 years, and he owed exactly nothing to anyone. While his neighbors lost everything, Leonard kept farming. And when the auctions came, when good land was selling for a fraction of its value because nobody had cash to buy it, Leonard was one of the few who did. He bought 40 acres from the Hendricks family, who had farmed next to him for 50 years. He paid fair price, more than the bank was asking, because it was the right thing to do. He bought another 60 acres from the Mahlers. Same story. By 1987, Leonard Grove owned 260 acres, all paid for in cash. And he was still farming with the 1952 Farmall Super M. "Doesn't that thing ever wear out?" a younger farmer asked him one day, watching Leonard plow a field with the same tractor that had beaten Wayne Pruitt 12 years earlier. Leonard patted the hood affectionately. "Things wear out when you don't take care of them. This tractor's been taken care of, but it's 35 years old. So am I, relatively speaking." Leonard smiled. "Age isn't the problem, son. Neglect is the problem. Misunderstanding is the problem. This tractor's got another 35 years in it, easy, maybe more." The younger farmer looked skeptical, but he also looked interested. "Could you teach me how to take care of equipment like that? How to make it last?" Leonard considered the question. He was 65 years old. He had no children, no one to pass his knowledge to. The things he'd learned from his father, from the army, from a lifetime of working with his hands, were locked inside his head, and someday they'd be gone. "Come by Saturday," Leonard said. "Bring your toolbox. We'll start with the basics." That Saturday, 3 young farmers showed up at Leonard's workshop. The Saturday after that, there were 7. By the end of the year, Leonard was running an informal school in equipment maintenance, passing on knowledge that the dealerships didn't teach and the manufacturers didn't want anyone to know. "The companies want you to buy new," Leonard explained to his students. "They make money when you replace things. They don't make money when you fix things yourself. So they make everything complicated, hard to understand, hard to repair. They want you dependent on them." He gestured to the Farmall, sitting in its place of honor in his workshop. This tractor was built when companies still believed a man should be able to work on his own equipment. Every part is accessible. Every system is logical. You can take the whole thing apart with basic tools and put it back together again. He looked at the young farmers, their faces eager in the workshop light. "That's what I want to teach you. Not just how to fix a Farmall, but how to think about machines, how to understand them, how to make them last. Let me tell you about the trophy, because that's the part of the story that most people don't know." Leonard never kept the trophy from the 1975 tractor pull. He didn't want it, didn't need a piece of metal to remind him of what had happened. When the fair committee tried to give it to him, he declined. But Wayne Pruitt kept his second-place trophy, not on display, hidden in a closet in his Omaha apartment, behind boxes of old paperwork and equipment catalogs from a dealership that no longer bore his name. In 1992, Wayne Pruitt died of a heart attack at the age of 62. His daughter, clearing out his belongings, found the trophy and almost threw it away. Then she found the letter. It was tucked inside the trophy's base, handwritten on dealership letterhead, dated September 1975, 1 month after the famous tractor pull. The letter was addressed to Leonard Grove. It had never been sent. "Dear Leonard," the letter began. "I've been trying to write this letter for 3 weeks. I've started it a dozen times and thrown it away a dozen times. But I can't stop thinking about what happened at the fair, and I can't move on until I say what I need to say. You humiliated me. In front of the whole county, you made me look like a fool. For weeks afterward, I wanted to hate you. I wanted to blame you for ruining my reputation, my business, my life. But here's the thing. You didn't humiliate me. I humiliated myself. You didn't make that bet. I did. You didn't brag about your tractor. I bragged about mine. You didn't call my equipment junk. I called yours junk, over and over for 20 years. And then you proved me wrong. Not with words, not with arguments, but with 92 feet of dirt. What bothers me most isn't that I lost the bet. It's that you didn't take the money. If you had taken it, I could have told myself that you were just greedy, that you hustled me, that it was about the cash. But you didn't want the money. You just wanted me to see, and I did see. I saw a man who knew his machine better than I've ever known anything in my life. I saw 23 years of work and knowledge and patience beat everything I thought I knew about tractors and farming and progress. I'm not going to send this letter. I don't have the courage. But I needed to write it, needed to put the words somewhere, needed to admit, at least to myself, that you were right and I was wrong. Old isn't the same as obsolete. Quiet isn't the same as stupid. And knowing how things work is worth more than all the horsepower money can buy. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of man who understands things the way you do, but I know now that such men exist, and that I spent 20 years laughing at one of them. I'm sorry, Leonard. I'm sorry I never said so. Wayne Pruitt. Wayne's daughter read the letter 3 times. Then she drove to Columbus, found out that Leonard Grove was still alive, 82 years old, still on his farm, and delivered the letter in person. Leonard read it slowly, sitting on his porch, looking out at the fields he'd worked for 60 years. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. What did it say? Wayne's daughter asked. Leonard was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, that same small, knowing smile he'd had at the fairgrounds in 19... It said he finally understood. Let me end this story where it belongs, in Leonard's workshop with the tractor that changed everything. Leonard Grove died in 1998, at the age of 78. He worked his farm until the last year of his life, finally retiring the Farmall only when his hands got too stiff to manage the clutch. His will was simple. The land went to a nephew who had learned farming at Leonard's side. The workshop and tools went to the informal students who had gathered there over the years, and the 1952 Farmall Super M went to the Platte County Historical Society. It sits there now, in a place of honor near the entrance, with a plaque that tells the story of the 1975 tractor pull. Visitors can see the faded red paint, the dents and rust spots, all the external evidence of a machine that should have been obsolete decades ago. What they can't see are the modifications that Leonard made, the custom pistons, the redesigned fuel system, the strengthened crankshaft. Those secrets went with Leonard to his grave. He never wrote them down, never told anyone exactly what he'd done. Some knowledge, he believed, has to be earned, not given. But the tractor still runs. Every year, on the anniversary of the famous tractor pull, someone from the Historical Society starts it up and drives it around the parking lot. The engine still purrs with that deep, smooth growl that shocked everyone back in 19... The tires still grip. The transmission still shifts as smoothly as the day Leonard finished rebuilding it. 46 years old when Leonard won his bet. 70 years old now, and still running. That's the real lesson of this story. Not that Leonard won a bet, or that Wayne lost one. Not that old tractors can beat new ones, or that knowledge beats horsepower. The lesson is simpler than that. The lesson is, take care of what you have. Understand it, respect it, put in the work year after year to make it the best it can be. Leonard Grove didn't need a new tractor. He needed to understand the one he had. And once he understood it, truly, deeply understood it, there was nothing it couldn't do. Most people never learn that lesson. They chase new things, better things, more expensive things. They throw away what they have in pursuit of what they want. Leonard kept what he had. He made it extraordinary. And when someone challenged him to prove it, he did, in 90 seconds. Wayne Pruitt bet $15,000 on horsepower. Leonard Grove bet his farm on understanding. We all know who won.